Happy Tuesday. We are so glad that you are tuning in today for our webinar, our fifth webinar of our series, all about homesickness and other mental health issues or things to look out for. Today we have Dr. Greg Vanderwall with us, and he's going to talk you through a little bit about some signs that you might want to look for, things to listen for with your student, and how to get them the assistance that they might need. So thanks so much, Greg, for being here with us. We appreciate it, and we look forward to lots of good information from you.
Thank you, Kim. As Kim said, my name is Greg Vanderwall. I am a clinical psychologist, and I'm the assistant director at the Counseling Center here at the University of Alabama. And I am going to talk to you today about the topic of homesickness. And we titled this presentation, Homesickness or Something More, and What to Do About It. I've often heard the comment along the lines of, it's just homesickness, or asking the question, is it just homesickness, or is this something I should be concerned about? And I think at the root of that statement or that question is that really people are trying to get at, is this thing that my student is experiencing something that's part of the normal adjustment process, or is it something that may be representative of something bigger, something more long-standing that we really need to pay attention or take action on? I don't want to minimize homesickness. It is a very real thing, and it can be very distressing. But what I hope to do today is to kind of differentiate between what we typically see with homesickness in students and what may be indicative of something that's a little bit more of a problem and more something that we need to address. So today we're going to explore what it means to adjust to college. We're going to take a look at what homesickness is and what it looks like. We're going to look at how to help a student work through feelings of homesickness, and then what to look for if it may be something more. And then we'll end up with some ideas or some tips on how to get them connected to help if that may be something they need. So freshmen beginning the college usually have expectations about college life long before they actually leave home. Some students look forward to college and are eager to experience more freedom and adventure. Other students may be enthusiastic about a college initially, but then discover that the actual experience falls short of their expectations. They don't feel happy, comfortable, or secure in their new environment. In addition, we certainly see some students who know that leaving home will be difficult and therefore kind of dread the thought of packing up and going to college. But no matter what the expectation, nearly every student encounters challenging experiences or encounters some sort of obstacle at the beginning of college that they didn't anticipate. Even positive life changes produce stress, and certainly the changes involved in leaving home for college are demanding and can lead to varying emotions such as sadness, loneliness, and worry. These feelings are typical. They're part of the normal developmental transition to college, but they can sometimes be pretty distressing. So I want to talk through a few of the most common changes that students encounter when they're adjusting to college. The first is increased personal freedom. Many students welcome the freedom to make their own decisions about what they want to do each day while in college. But other students may find that this level of freedom is strangely unfamiliar or may be difficult for them to manage. Freshmen who live on campus may maintain daily or frequent contact with family by way of phone or computer, but they may make many more personal decisions and choices than they did before coming to college and high school. Another change for our students is increased responsibility. So students have a greater responsibility for their daily schedule. They got to make choices about when and how to study, when to socialize, when to focus on new acquaintances or friendships, when to become involved in activities. They often have to budget their own money, make time to exercise, make time to eat, and even sleep well. They're faced with the challenges of learning how to balance going to class, participating in activities, completing schoolwork on time, taking basic care of oneself, and having fun. Students are faced, often for the first time, with a need to take more initiative to address responsibilities. A third way that students are adjusting when they come to college is involving managing time. Freshmen typically experience changing demands on their time. Days are less routine and less predictable than they are in high school. Some freshmen feel they have virtually no time for themselves because of the time and energy needed to manage multiple obligations. College students may seem difficult, or college classes may seem difficult and draining, and may involve many more hours of studying than they're used to. A fourth way that adjusting college means change is that students are just in a different environment. They're in different surroundings and they have different relationships at college. Freshmen have to adjust to these new surroundings, relate to unfamiliar people. Some students often seem very different from their family and friends and acquaintances from home. Freshmen who live away from home typically have to learn to relate to and negotiate conflict with new roommates. There may be a hope that one's roommate will be a close friend, and it can be disappointing when that kind of relationship does not develop. Freshmen also experience new expectations from adults in college. For example, professors typically do not call if a class is missed or follow up that way, but likely grade for attendance. In college, there's usually less interaction between parents and the school, and the students are faced with the need to work out problems or concerns directly with their professors or directly with other people at the school. And lastly, a big change that comes with coming to college is dealing with the changing relationships with family and friends back at home. As students experience more freedom and responsibility in college, relationships with parents and other significant people change. Freshmen, as well as their parents, can fear losing aspects of their relationships with each other. Frequent calls or texts home from freshmen are common, especially during the first few months. It may be very hard to say goodbye at the end of breaks or at the end of the semester when they're coming back. It can be difficult to readjust to the rules back at home once they've been away, such as curfew or chores or responsibility for younger siblings. I think it's important to point out that parents also need to adjust during this period, not just the student, especially when it comes to their changing relationship with their student. So freshmen and really all college students faced a lot of change, a lot of adjustment as they come away from home and as they work toward their college degree. And this can be stressful. All right. So homesickness is our topic. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what we actually mean when we use the term homesickness. So when we talk about homesickness, we look at this as a kind of an acute longing and or a preoccupation for familiar things, familiar situations, familiar places, familiar relationships. This type of longing or preoccupation can sometimes cause some functional impairments, meaning it can get in the way of a student's ability to function in the way that they're able to, whether that's academically or socially. And you can think of it as kind of just missing what is normal, missing routine, missing stability that comes with being home or being around things that are familiar. Homesickness can start right away, and it's very common to see that in students in the first 4 to 6 to 8 weeks when they first start at college, but it can also often manifest itself at other times too. So it can be delayed. It could happen after coming home for a first break and then going back to school. That's sometimes when homesickness hits. Sometimes it can even be as late as sophomore or junior year if things have changed. If they really had a different experience while at home for the summer, that really made leaving that situation much harder. So homesickness isn't just a brand new freshman problem. It can be something that any student can experience at any time because it is related to adjusting and change and longing for something that was familiar. So what does homesickness look like? Homesickness can manifest itself in many different ways. Some things to look out for to suggest that a student that you have may be dealing with homesickness are feelings of sadness or irritability. They may describe themselves as feeling depressed. Often it can show up as just a general sense of disappointment with unmet expectations. If you have a student who was expecting a lot from their college experience and it didn't quite go the way that they wanted, or it's not quite going the way they wanted to, that can often trigger some homesickness. It can certainly show up as feelings of anxiety or nervousness or worry, preoccupation with things that may or may not be in that student's control, trying to find some sense of stability. Homesickness can also manifest itself in just a heightened emotionality. Students can experience greater swings in emotion from being just fine and happy with something new or what they're experiencing to be really upset and missing home. And that can change from moment to moment. Homesickness can also show up in just having some minor physical ailments, headaches, tension, and that often results from just being under a lot of stress. And it can manifest itself in a physical way. Homesickness might also be an issue if you're finding that your student is having a lot of these problems when they're at school, but they find a lot of relief at home, or they express a lot of longing for home in order to gain some relief from some of these experiences they're having or some of these symptoms they're having. If the intensity of the symptoms they're having is different at school than it is at home, that might be an indication that they're dealing with homesickness. A vulnerability for homesickness can be affected by a lot of things. Students, how far away from home a student is might affect that. Students who are further from home or aren't able to go back home as easily may have a greater susceptibility to homesickness. Certainly that lack of met expectations. There could be a sense of anticlimax at finally arriving at the university after working towards it for so long, or to find that something is different than they were expecting. Another thing that can affect homesickness is whether they were excited to come in the first place. Students choose colleges for many different reasons. Some people come to college because that's where they wanted to go and they've always wanted to go there. Sometimes they come for different reasons. And if they weren't responsible for the decision to come to the university, that can have an effect on their homesickness. Certainly it can come just by feeling overwhelmed and overloaded. Feeling like they've got so much work to do and they don't have a whole lot of control over it. Experiencing a contrast in lifestyles between what they're used to at home and what college looks like when they're living here can result in homesickness. And certainly how they're talking to themselves. If they're discouraging to themselves or self-critical or engaging in some self-doubting, that can certainly contribute to feelings of homesickness. So one thing I want to make perfectly clear is that homesickness in and of itself is not necessarily a huge problem. It's actually perfectly normal. When much of what is familiar and reliable is back home, feeling homesick is a natural response to that. It's a natural response to a sense of loss of what is familiar. And some studies have shown upwards of 70% of students feel this way at some point. So the feeling in and of itself is not necessarily a problem. And it's something that a lot of our students are going to experience. And honestly, admitting that you actually feel homesick is a really good way of coping with it. Actually admitting it, actually acknowledging that, hey, I might be struggling a little bit because I do miss what's familiar. That can be a really good step towards coping well with it. But it does mean that taking action is important. So taking action rather than waiting for it to go away on its own is essential and necessary to keep what is rather normal in homesickness from necessarily escalating or emerging later, disguised as something more severe, like headaches or illness, fatigue, lack of motivation, or other problems like that. But it is really important to know that for a majority of students here, feelings of homesickness are a normal part of the adjustment process. All right, so what are some things you as parents can do to help your student overcome feelings of homesickness? And the number one word I'm going to use here is encourage. You can be an encourager to your student. Encourage them to do things, to look at things in a certain way, to engage in things. But your role is to encourage your student through this process, through this time where they might be feeling homesick. If you respond in the same level of distress as your student might be feeling in the moment, sometimes that can actually escalate the distress they're feeling. But if you can encourage them through this time, it can be really helpful. So, what can you encourage? One thing you can do is encourage your student to get involved. Being involved and invested um, in where they are is a great way of starting to build those new relationships and starting to make their college environment feel normal. Um, Oftentimes, students get in trouble with homesickness because even though they're physically at college, their mind, their thoughts, their interactions are all still back home. They're thinking about it, they're longing for it. And they're not really present here. Even though they're here, even though they're going to class, they're wishing for something different. By getting involved here on campus, they can start to get invested in campus. They can start to get invested in what they're doing here. And that can be a really good remedy for feelings of homesickness. You can encourage your student to pursue enjoyable activities, to do things that they enjoy. That helps all of us feel better. And sometimes when we're feeling overly stressed or overly taxed, or if we're missing home, we tend to not do those things that we know are enjoyable for us because we feel like we have to prioritize so many other things on top of it. But it's not a good solution to just get rid of those things that we enjoy, because that can contribute to our stress. So you can encourage your student to keep doing those things that they love, to keep engaging in those things that will help them feel better in their spot on campus. You can encourage them to make sure they're keeping on top of personal organization. Sometimes when our life is unorganized, that can add to stress. If they're not taking good care of their belongings, taking good care of their schoolwork, keeping good track of that, that can contribute to additional stress, and it can exacerbate things like homesickness. So you can encourage them to just make sure they're keeping on top of things and staying organized. I also think it's really important to encourage that they stay in touch with family. And there's a balance here, and you certainly don't necessarily want your student calling or texting every hour of the day, but it's important for them to stay in touch, to be able to have that open line of communication back home, to be able to be open and honest about how they're feeling, and find support from those back at home. That can be really helpful. You can certainly encourage your student to work on keeping expectations flexible. We said before that oftentimes homesickness can result from having unmet expectations. We expect college to go one way, and if it doesn't go that way right away, it can be really disappointing. But there's no one right way to do college, and we rarely encounter times in life where everything we expect goes the way we want it. And the same is true for coming to college. And if your student can work on keeping their expectations flexible, that can be a really good way of dealing with the little speed bumps that come up with coming to college. And it can help with homesickness. And we said encourage involvement. A great way to encourage involvement is to encourage the student to volunteer. Often helps students feel better about what they're doing, where they are, if they're engaged in something that helps somebody else. And volunteering is a great way to do that. Encourage your students to go to new places. Encourage your student to engage in new things, try some new things, do something with a new person or a new friend. Take that step out, even if they're nervous about it, even if it doesn't feel comfortable yet. But actually facing those fears, facing those things that might not be comfortable, is the perfect way to start getting comfortable with them. And so if you as a parent can encourage them to engage those things rather than pull back from them, that's a great way of helping them overcome homesickness. And then lastly, encourage them to set goals. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by the enormity of all the things that are required of us when we're at college. And if your student can set some simple, basic, step-by-step goals for themselves for the next day, the next week, the next month, sometimes that helps them feel a little bit more in control of what they're doing. And that can really help attenuate some of that homesickness as well. Another thing that you can encourage is good self-care. And what I mean by good self-care is taking care of yourself and the basic needs that we have. So we all need to sleep well. We all need to eat well. We all need to exercise, and we all need balance in our life. And that's something you can encourage in your student. Um, so making sure that they're paying attention to these things, that they are getting enough sleep. So often that's one of the biggest things to adjust to and come into college is getting enough sleep. And if you're only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night, you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage for dealing with the stressors that come up during the day. Eating well, exercising, balancing work and leisure activities are also good ways to take care of yourself and are good ways to help manage the stressors that they're dealing with. We've said before, but it can be an important thing for you to normalize some of these feelings of homesickness, to say it's okay to feel that way, to say I understand why you'd feel that way. Just having that sense of understanding from somebody who's important in their life, somebody who loves them, can be really helpful. And then one thing I put on here to encourage students to avoid is oftentimes we see students tend to cope by doing things like drinking alcohol or using other substances. And it can be a really tempting way to cope because it's an immediate fix for how you might be feeling, but it can cause a lot more stress than it helps with. So encourage them to avoid that, especially when they're struggling with stress, and homesickness is important. All right, let's talk a little bit about when your student may be struggling with something more than just homesickness, because sometimes it may be something beyond that typical adjustment we're seeing that drives homesickness. So here's some things to keep in mind. You know, if your student's telling you that they're afraid to go new places or meet new people, if they're spending excessive amount of time alone or isolated, or spending a lot of time thinking about people and places at home to where they're not engaging with things at their new place or at school, when they're spending excessive amount of time excluding other activities, that could be a sign that something, maybe another step needs to be taken. If they see drastic changes in their eating or sleeping patterns, if they feel like others around them are making them feel isolated, are leaving them out, or are picking on them, if they're feeling overly self-conscious, if they're having feelings of loneliness that are overwhelming to them, if they're really struggling with concentration or motivation, if they tell you that they're having persistent feelings of anxiety or depression, things that last perhaps beyond what we'd expect a reasonable amount of time for that adjustment period. These are all signs that there may be something more going on. Certainly not a guarantee of that, but these should be signs where you might encourage them to reach out for help at that point in time. I do want to talk a little bit about what help is available. One thing you can encourage a student to do is to reach out to the people that are around them. Most of our freshmen, especially if they're coming from out of town, live on campus. And so they're surrounded by housing and recreational staff. They're surrounded by upperclassmen, new friends, professors, academic advisors. All of these people can be a good source of help when they're struggling with homesickness or when something else more may be going on. These people are knowledgeable about these struggles. They've seen many students who have gone through similar experiences. And some of them, especially the upperclassmen and friends, are maybe going through similar experiences or have gone through similar experiences themselves. They can be a really good source of help. We talked a lot about getting engaged, and so I think reaching out to college organizations can be a really good source of help. I put one resource on here. It's called The Source, and the website, thesource.ua.edu. This is at this website, there's a list of all campus organizations. It's a really good resource for knowing what's out there, what they can get involved in, and a good way to find ways to get connected. Certainly, counseling services are available to your student for help. We have a counseling center here that I work at that's devoted solely to students. You can reach us at counseling.ua.edu or call the number on the screen here, 205-348-3863. We offer individual and group counseling for students. We offer consultation where they can call and just talk to somebody about what's going on. That resource is available to you as parents as well. You can call us at any time and ask us questions about your student, about what they're going through, and we can help make recommendations or suggestions of things that they could do. We want you to know that resource is available to you. And then certainly student health services, we have their website listed here. Many different campus ministries and groups like that can be a really good source of help. And then certainly the Center for Academic Success, whose website is also listed here, can be a really good source of help, especially if it's for students who are struggling with academic side of things when they're adjusting. All right, I want to end with just a few bullet points of things to remember. If nothing else, you can work in encouraging your student to do these things as a way to help manage things like homesickness. So encourage your student to ask for help when they need it. So often we get caught up in what we're doing that we forget that we can't do everything ourselves. And there are so many people here at this university who are here to help. And they can reach out and ask for that. And that's what we want as employees here at the university. We want to be able to help our students be successful. So encourage your student to reach out for help. Encourage your student to remember that no decision is set in stone. That can be a really important lesson to learn. I'm a firm believer that flexibility is a hallmark of good mental health as an adult. And the ability to make changes when changes need to be made is a really good thing. So reminding them that things can change, things can be different than what they expected, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Encourage your student to seek help sooner rather than later. It's often easier to stem the tide of something like homesickness than to wait to get to a point where things break down and to get help at that point. So as soon as they notice a problem, reach out for help. That's a really good thing to encourage them to do. Encourage them to engage in good self-care. Like we said before, eating well, sleeping well, getting some exercise. Encourage them to be proactive with their needs, or getting their needs met, proactive with their education in their classes, and encouraging them to get involved. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you. And like I said, please give us a call at the Counseling Center if you have further questions.
Greg, thank you so much for this great information. Next week will be our last webinar in our series, and we will be hearing from the Director of Student Care and Wellbeing, Jeremy Henderson. And so he will talk a little bit about their services and how their office can help students who are in need, much like Greg has talked about today about how the Counseling Center is here for students as well. Again, we encourage you to, if you have any questions, you are welcome to post them in our comments, but more likely, reaching out to the Counseling Center directly would be most beneficial. You're also, of course, welcome to call our office, and we're happy to help connect you with those resources as well. Thanks so much. Have a great Tuesday, and roll Tide.